Join me in welcoming Stephen Bassett. There you go.
Ah, yes. As I was sitting there, I was wondering, where do the architects of the old paradigm meet each year? And what would happen if they ended up at the same hotel? Since this is the Architects of the New Paradigm Conference, and I'm speaking, apparently somebody thinks that I'm building something, and who knows what that is. It could be dangerous. So perhaps you should know a little something about me, not too much, just something. So let me say this. I'm not a genius. I know this because I've met some geniuses in my life, and I'm pretty confident that I don't get to sit at their lunch table in the cafeteria. And I don't have 5 or 6 degrees from Harvard like Danny Sheehan, who I might say has put them to very good use because he is one of the great legal activists of the 20th century and now the 21st century. He's a 2-century guy. I am just a poor political activist without portfolio, trying to get the government to do something it doesn't want to do, which is pretty much what all political activists do. That's what they're trying to do. And sometimes that goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. There's something else about me you should know, and that is I'm not who you think I am. And I know somebody in the audience just went, yes, I knew it. He's Illuminati. When I first started out, I was called the UFO lobbyist. Catchy phrase. I didn't like it. I had registered as a lobbyist on the extraterrestrial issue. UFO was nowhere in the registration, still isn't. But that's cool, I get it, the UFO lobbyist. And I tried to push back against that. I was thinking about having them say, here's Mr. Bassett, the extraterrestrial lobbyist. But I realized that that could get awkward because there would be some people going around saying, yeah, he represents extraterrestrials. Which might have been a better way to go because they might have paid me. And if not money, then occasional trip, a little getaway to the Palladian star system, something. Nobody else wanted to do this job, so it was wide open, and I took that. And before you know it, I was trying to push back, and one of the first things is when I was doing Art Bell, who let me come on the show and talk about the politics of this. He hated politics, but he let us come on, people like myself, and played a very important part in allowing this an audience to develop around the politics of this. We started talking about the politics of UFOs, which is improvement of sorts. And then it became the politics of disclosure. And then it became exopolitics. And exopolitics is the word. That's the word. But it had it was going pretty well for a while, but it's lost its mojo. So you don't hear it so much. I think it'll make a comeback. And then it was basically about disclosure. And I would sometimes call myself the disclosure advocate. And that's really good. I like that. But the fact is, these are just DBAs doing business as. What I am, what I have been and always will be, is an anti-war activist. And how that came about, that's another lecture. I've only just talked about that once in a presentation about 15 years ago. So, as I've gotten into this, I realized I couldn't get into that subject, and I haven't, because I knew that if I did, it would split the audience. So if I started getting into anti-war things, and there's plenty of things to say about that, there would be some people who would be going, I don't like that. I don't like that position at all. So screw you and the horse name disclosure you wrote in on. And I lose them. And so I don't go there. However, as disclosure approaches, as we get closer, I think I'm going to be going there a lot more. All right? So what I'm going to try to do today is do something I never get to do, which is to give you a presentation under 2.5 hours. Most of you that know me know I can do 2.5 hours standing on my head eating a ham sandwich. I think I did that once, actually. But I got 45 minutes. Now it's down to 40. And so I said, what am I going to do? How can I? And I decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a TED Talk. I'm going to give a TED Talk. TED is a big deal. They've done thousands and thousands of TED Talks and TEDx Talks. In fact, TED has a substantial presence in Vancouver, I understand. All right? And so, let me see, this is my first attempt. Boop. Oh, what happened to TED? Okay, it's no problem. I'm going to give a TED Talk. But before I do that, I'm going to mention this, that if I have made a contribution to architecting any paradigm, it's this. Over the last 21 years, I've spent a great deal of time trying to put myself in a saucer, an antigravitic craft, several hundred miles above the Earth, just sitting there. And they can do that because they're antigravitic. And climb in the mind of an extraterrestrial in that craft and looking down at the Earth for thousands of years, perhaps. And it's tricky. You should try it sometime. And think like an extraterrestrial. To look at us through their eyes, not our eyes. In other words, to try to strip the anthropomorphic bias out of it. And in that way, try to figure out what's going on. Why are they here? Why now? Where is it going? And so forth. But from their eyes. And it's fun to do, and I recommend you do it. So I've been up at that saucer a lot, and it's given me a perspective in ways that perhaps I might not have arrived at. And we're getting in that today. And so that is the basis for a TED Talk. Now, over the years, I have submitted a request to speak at TED several times, but I never hear back. In fact, and they've given thousands of talks, and they have never addressed this issue, ever, except in December of 2016. The first time ever. And all of those talks, finally December, after the election, interesting enough, Nick Mesrich, I think his name is, well, Ben Mesrich, gave a TED lecture on why I believe in UFOs and you should too. Kind of sprung from a book he did called The 37th Parallel. He's a very affable guy, and he's a good writer. And it was kind of fun. And that was it, December 2016. There have been other talks with people that are associated with this subject, but we're going to talk about something else. Rupert Sheldrake, Russell Targ, Graham Hancock. They either banned them or they censored them. They pulled them down off the web. Well, that's how truth embargoes are maintained. That's how it works. But it's not just TED. Since 1947, millions of college professors, teachers, have gone through teaching hundreds of millions of courses in the now 5,000 universities and colleges in the United States, and I'll include all the ones up here too. And in all of that, hundreds of thousands of millions of lectures. And in all of that time, there has never been an appropriate program of study of this phenomena, in spite of the 50,000 articles that have been written worldwide about it since '47, and all the work and all the effort and all the stuff that's been in the news. They haven't done that. There have been a couple of vanity courses. Some professor or teacher might like it, and like this to teach a little one here, and there's been a couple of those. One fellow did one at a community college, but didn't go well for him. The best known of that is Dr. David Jacobs, who was the history professor at Temple, and of course wrote about the abduction phenomena. And he was a good teacher and respected. And of course, he'd written the book. He knew a lot. And so they let him have a course, and he would teach this course. And he taught it for a number of years. I remember 19 years ago, David said to me, I was talking to him, and we're talking about the course, and he said something along the lines, well, I teach this course, and that's kind of fun. But you know, Steve, I'll never be a full professor. He retired just a while ago, still an associate professor. Right? That's how truth embargoes are maintained. And we need to change that. Right? So, and I should say, and I've said this many times, that the failure of the academic and intellectual community of America, Canada, the free world, to engage this issue is easily the greatest intellectual failure of all time. The second place is way back. The Catholic Church had a bit of a problem with the Copernican revolution. It got a little testy. Occasionally somebody was burned at the stake, something like that. But that was nothing compared to this, right? What happened? What went wrong? We need to figure that out, and we need to reform the intellectual community and the academic system, because we have a problem in the United States because our constitutional separation of church and state is closing. But we also have a problem with the constitutional separation of, not constitutional, but the separation of gown and town, gown and state, where the intellectuals are just not going in certain places because it's inconvenient. Now, this happened in Nazi Germany. The intellectuals buckled in, some left, Soviet Union and so forth, but they were facing a bullet in the brain. Right? If you want to go there, you get a bullet in the back of the head. That wasn't the problem in the United States. That wasn't going to happen. So how did they completely abrogate their intellectual power? And their job is learning and teaching where we're going and trying to understand possibilities and taking new. How did they abrogate that completely for 70 years? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do the TED Talk that I was never able to do. So let's begin. To start, I have this phrase that I just encountered. I was flying back from Barcelona, and I watched a movie that I'd never seen. And it surprised me. And the movie was called Goodbye, Christopher Robin. I recommend it. I'm sure it's on Netflix. And it's about A.A. Milne and Christopher Robin, the boy, and what happened back then. And it turns out that A.A. Milne was a prolific writer, very successful, but he had to go fight World War I. So he went. And he had 2 stints there, and one of them was the Battle of the Somme. And the Battle of the Somme was quite an affair. 3 million men were involved, and it had somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million casualties, 300,000 dead. It was fought in trenches, in mud, in disease, and filth for 4 months in 1916. And he was there. When he got back to England, he had PTSD. They didn't call it that then. And he wrote for a couple of years, but then PTSD caught up with him. And he had a problem writing. And this is around 1924. And then he had this fixation that he wanted to write an anti-war book. And so this is represented in the movie. And essentially, he's complaining to his wife, and she's upset because he's complaining about how he can't write and he needs to get away, and he wants to write this anti-war book, and this is bugging her. And at some point, she says this to him. She says his wife, Daphne Milne, who was a socialite, right, and enjoyed that, and her husband was funky. He was upset. She didn't know what PTSD was, and she wasn't at the Battle of the Somme. She says, you know, what writing a book against war is like? It's like writing a book against Wednesdays. Wednesdays are a fact of life. And if you don't like them, you could just stay in bed. But you can't stop them because Wednesdays are coming. And if today isn't actually a Wednesday, it soon will be. I keep that quote in mind as we go forward in my little TED Talk. That's interesting. suddenly I'm missing part of my TED Talk. Did that bounce over? No, it didn't. Oh, we got some interesting stuff going on here. All right, I'm sure it's collusion. The title is Entropy, Asymmetry, Psychopathology, and Disclosure. Now, I know some of you are thinking, there is no way that he's going to get those four things together in the same talk, right? Ain't gonna happen, right? No way. Au contraire, mesdames et messieurs, au contraire. Shout out to the Canadian, French, and English heritage. We are going to put them together. And we start with entropy. Entropy is a confusing subject for a lot of people. It's tricky. It's not so much a law of physics as it is a manifestation of other laws, such as the arrow of time. Because entropy is a concept that everything is tending, no matter what, trending towards disorder. And more disorder means more entropy. All right. And this is universal. And so you think of entropy as a river going in one direction, because one of the key elements that make entropy what it is the arrow of time. The arrow of time only goes in one direction. Now, there are people out there who are saying that they are traveling in time. They're coming back from the future. They've gone to the past. They've come back. They're time traveling all the time. I have no confidence in that. I'm not on the board with that. I think time only goes in one direction. You know, we don't go forward a couple of months and go back a month. Maybe if you've had a very long night out, you may think you've gone back a month, but no, it's only going in one direction. And then you've got certain thermodynamic laws. And so essentially, we're always tending toward disorder, including our bodies. That's what kills us ultimately. We become much more disorderly. So this is a very powerful thing, very powerful thing. And this river of time and entropy is like a river going in one direction, and sometimes it's going very slowly, and sometimes it's a raging torrent. And if you want to create order, you have to swim against it. You have to swim upstream. And if the water's not going too fast, and you swim and swim and swim for a long time, you can actually make a little progress. Because it turns out, fortunately for us, that you can have pockets of order being created within the larger arena, which is always tending toward disorder, if there's energy. You have to have energy. And the biosphere is an example of this. We have this incredible biosphere. It's been developing for billions of years, getting more and more complex and structured, and the reason for that is because of the sun. It has been pouring energy down on the Earth for billions of years, and that's why we're able to have order here, even though it's going against the entropic principle. If you turned off the sun, the entropy of the Earth would exponentially increase really, really fast. All right, so we have this idea out of the way because, and that's just preface to the first important point I want to make. And it's not that. It's this. This is a bridge being built over the Port of Los Angeles. It is called the Gerald Desmond Bridge, which is going to replace the old Gerald Desmond Bridge. And it's quite a thing. I have passed by it many, many times. I come and go in that area often. I'll go away for months at a time. I'll come back and I'll see it slowly. I can see the construction. It's really, really impressive. And the old bridge goes right by it. So you're looking right up and you're seeing this unbelievable bridge being made. Eventually, it's going to look like this. It's pretty cool. It'll be finished next year, 6 years in the making, and it will cost $1.5 billion. That's a lot of money for a taxpayer. Jeff Bezos can lose that much in about 10 seconds if Donald Trump puts out a nasty tweet about Amazon. But still, it's a lot of money in my book, $1.5 billion. Now imagine this. Imagine a warplane flying over the Port of Los Angeles. F-16, F-18, F-25, 30, whatever F they're up to. That's interesting. I like that. I got to remember that. And it launches 8 laser-guided bombs. They're called JDAMs. I think it's Joint Directed Aerial Munitions, something like that. JDAMs. They're very effective and cost effective. They don't cost much. Like cruise missiles cost a huge amount. $20,000 apiece. They launch 8 of those, and they guide them in, and they take out the two. Where's this thing? Oh yeah, they take out the 2 main pillars, and of course 3 or 4 or 5 on each side, and the bridge is destroyed in seconds. For the purpose of this argument, we'll say 10 seconds. Bridge gone. Right. Let's do the math. Okay, it costs $1.5 billion. The bombs cost $20,000 apiece. That's what if you need one, that's what a laser-guided bomb goes for these days. And we'll throw in the pilot's salary and the gas for the airplane and whatever. We'll round it off at $200,000. And so the ratio of what it costs to build it and what it costs to destroy it is 7,500 to 1. That is asymmetric. That is very asymmetric. Now, we know about these things intuitively, but we haven't thought about it. But let's talk about the time. It's going to take 6 years to build this bridge. That, in case you didn't know it, is 1.89 billion seconds. It took 10 seconds to destroy it. So what's the ratio in terms of time on this particular project? The ratio is 189 million to 1. That is a significant asymmetry. It took 189 million more seconds, or ratio of that, to destroy this magnificent bridge than it was to build it. That is the asymmetry of destruction versus construction, and it essentially emerges out of the entropic principle somehow. It's not our fault either. It's not our fault. This is baked into the physical world. But it is a real problem. Because in the ancient world, these asymmetries were not like this. In a lot of ways, it took about as much time to destroy something as it took to build it. So the ratio might be 1 to 1, maybe 2 to 1. It's not a big deal. But suddenly, as we approach the 20th century, in the 1900s, this kind of asymmetry starts to exponentially grow until we can destroy things in ways you can't imagine. And the asymmetry is staggering. So that's asymmetry. Let's move on to the next point. Oh, I want to give you another example first, before we do that. And I'm going to bring the asymmetric concept closer to home, make it more of a social thing. This is a little town called Sonoma. I've visited many times. It's in Northern California. It's very nice. A very wonderful town. It's fantastic. It has this beautiful little square, and the businesses are all around the square, and it's free parking, and then nice homes, and then as you go outside, there's vineyards all around it, and it's peaceful and it's low crime. It's just a superb community. There's a lot of money in that area, which makes it possible to do that. Money is like energy, isn't it? And so it's orderly and it's nice. Now imagine this. On a Sunday night, all the Sonomans go to bed, very content. They've all had a little bit of wine. There's a lot of wine there. And that evening, in the middle of the night, a group of people, about 10, could be some male and some female, but let's face it, it's all male. They acquired 20 cans of spray paint. Not the cheap stuff, not that that water-soluble, water-washable stuff, the real stuff, the permanent paint spray, cans of spray paint. And they go out and they graffiti the entire town. Every building, every commercial building, every wall, every surface that they can get to, they graffiti it. It takes about 3 hours. Pretty much the entire town. And not that great artistic stuff that looks really cool, but then the cheap graffiti, this kind of stuff here. And so the Sonomans wake up on Monday morning, they go out, and their town has been completely transformed. My God. It's a mess. It's awful. I wish, about 10 years ago, I went to Rome. I was staggered. They'd completely given up. The entire areas of Rome is completely graffitied. Everything, except the government buildings. If you graffiti them, apparently very bad things happen to you. And it was really sad. It will take weeks and weeks to get that graffiti off. And in a lot of cases, you got to paint over. Huge amount of effort will be required to undo what a few people did in a couple of hours in the middle of the night. That is asymmetry of construction versus destruction. So that brings us to the next one. This is fun. Psychopathology. And again, this is not our fault. This is not our fault. It is baked into the nature of evolution and the principle of survival of the fittest and the male role in all of that, not the female role. Men and our proto-humans and hominids, male, involved in making sure that they live and mom lives and the kids live, and so they have to be certain ways and so forth. There's that. But then when humans started getting really pretty cool and developing civilization about 8,000 years ago, they just took off where other animals simply wouldn't go. And that is they started creating an incredibly complex world with lots of things going on. So that a person born into this world has this very advanced brain that is able to absorb a lot of information, no question, and a huge divergence of experience. And so one person is born over in this country, in that situation, and they have this experience, another person's over here. And the effect of this is to create a spectrum of personality that no other animal group has. I mean, really. You could go rescue 1,000 dogs and keep them at home, and they're all pretty much the same. But 1,000 humans? No. We have this huge spectrum of personality. Think of it as like the electromagnetic spectrum, which has got all these different frequencies. And the visual frequency zone is just kind of like this. And then you've got your infrared, you've got your ultraviolet, gamma, X-rays, all of that. It's like that. It's this huge spectrum, which makes people very interesting. And why we pay attention to each other so much. It makes our lives incredibly interesting. Vast spectrum of personalities and people. Okay, but we got a problem. And it's baked in again, and it's a serious problem that we have not dealt with yet. And here it is. This is, get the right one. There is a particular personality segment of that spectrum, like the visual spectrum, that is really problematic. And it's right here. And this particular area includes a number of things, but they have various names. This is not everything, but it's some. It includes borderline personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder. And these various disorders have some things in common. There's overlap. Lack of empathy. Just don't have much empathy for people at all. No conscience whatsoever, which is actually what we call a sociopath. Massive narcissism, and so forth. Need to control, need to dominate. And fortunately, they're a small portion of the human race. It's very likely there isn't a person in this room right now. This is a very nice audience, a nice Canadian audience, mostly. And there may not be one of these people in this room. However, I'm willing to bet that every one of you has met at least one in your lifetime. And things generally don't go very well, do they? In fact, there is a protocol when dealing with a person like that. You don't want to move quickly. You want to move very slowly. You want to rise to your tallest height, put your arms out, and then back slowly out of the room and go on with your life. Unfortunately, there is a relationship here, which is, again, it's not really your fault. This is baked into the system. And that is this. It turns out that the traits that are comprised in that particular grouping are extremely useful in becoming the leaders of people, the rulers of empires, the presidents of countries, the prime ministers, the khans, the czars, and their chiefs of staff, and so forth. And it's also the case that this grouping is predominantly men. And that, again, is part of the evolutionary process of sorts. And this is a major problem. In other words, if you have no empathy whatsoever for people, you have no conscience, you're ruthless, you'll do whatever you have to do. And that's very helpful if you're trying to get into power. You got some adversaries, you just kill them. If you're paranoid, you're totally controlling. And being controlling, control people and say, oh, get here, get there. Stalin was famously paranoid. If you're massively narcissistic and you're telling yourself and everybody else how wonderful you are, how extraordinary you are, and you're very convincing, pretty soon people believe you're as wonderful as you say you are, and they go, lead us. The interesting thing about narcissism is that most narcissists are not really believe that they're wonderful. In fact, they're incredibly shame-based people with massive holes in their soul. And they have chosen to deal with that by telling themselves how incredible they are so that make them feel better. And if other people say that to them, it helps. They're trying to fill that hole in the soul with praise, but it's unfillable. And so they're like a black hole, and they will take everything in, and nothing comes out. These traits make it easier to become leaders of people. And that's exactly what has happened. And we know this, and we understand this now. We didn't understand it 2,000 years ago as well. And we even know who they were. Pol Pot, Alexander, Genghis Khan, Stalin, Hitler, Baby Doc Duvalier. We can go on and on and on. We know who they are. We know what they do. And guess what? Again, this is not our fault. When you combine this fact with the asymmetry of destruction versus construction, you have got a problem. You have got a really big problem, and we have not dealt with this. We just haven't confronted it. We haven't dealt with it. And we could deal with it, but we haven't. We have a better chance now than ever. So that's the psychopathology part. See, I'm doing pretty well here. Which brings us to the disclosure part. Let's climb back up in that saucer. And let's start looking down on this planet. Not just for a few years, but maybe for thousands of years. They've seen this. This is not their first rodeo. Shout out to Calgary, Alberta. They've seen this before. They've followed us. They know what we're doing. And come 1900, they knew what was going to happen next. The moment we hit atomic physics, they knew what was coming. They could almost probably predict within a decade just exactly when certain milestones would be reached. We were going to build bombs around this time. We were going to get computers around this time. We were going to start getting into deep genetics around a certain time. And we were going to get into machine learning and artificial intelligence around a certain time. We were going to be able to build interstellar starships. And all of this is going to happen very quickly because, as you know, when we hit 1900, the technology curve started going straight up, and it's still going up like that. And they also knew that we're not ready to deal with that. We're not. What can I say? When I entered college, I was 16 going on 11. It didn't go well. All right? So, in my view, what happened is that when we hit a key milestone, which is the creation and dropping of those bombs in 1945, they had to change their relationship with us. In fact, they had to begin a transition. There was no other options at that point. And so the transition, which they've assisted, is to get us from the pre-disclosure world to the post-disclosure world. Absolutely has to happen. And that means we were going to have to look into a lot of dark places, drag a lot of information out, and do the activism, do the architecting, and all everything else we got to do to build the basis for going into the post-disclosure world, which we've almost accomplished. And we're going to learn many things in the post-disclosure world. A lot about ETs. We're going to look at the research of the civilian efforts. Huge numbers of contactees are going to come out of the closet. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. And everybody's going to want to talk to them. Everybody. Because you've just been told by your government, ETs are real. This is the real phenomena. They're here. And you want to know everything about it. And who are you going to go to? Are you going to call up the hotline at the Pentagon? No. There's all these contactees. They've actually been in the same room with them. They've been dealing with them since they were children. You want to talk to them. And you're going to find them. And you'll have 2 or 3 at every one of your parties. And that'll be interesting. And they'll be out of the closet, which will be nice, because it's not fun being in a closet. That's another thing that has to end in our societies, all societies. And we will have a couple of years of a extraordinary learning curve, and we'll get very used to the idea of extraterrestrials being here and not being alone. And this could happen very soon. I'm predicting possibly next year around spring, based upon certain political developments in the United States, which giant supercomputers right now are virtually overheating, trying to calculate what the hell's going to happen. But something is going to happen, and when it starts to resolve, things are going to pick up again. But this isn't the end game. I'm up in that saucer looking down. I'm saying, okay, things are going well. We've started the transition. There's been disclosure. They're learning about us. What next? Open contact. That's where this has always been heading. Open contact. Not showing up in your bedroom at 2 in the morning. Not one ET, maybe, I don't know, having a meeting with Eisenhower in 1950, whatever. Having a little chat, some tea. No, open contact, where there's communication going on between extraterrestrials of multiple civilizations and our leaders, and we know what it is. It's being told to us. Yeah, they had a meeting. This is what was said. That's pretty intense. I think it's 2 years. 2 years after disclosure. We're going to see that. And then things are going to get really interesting. I suspect that the ETs will want to make friends, want to get on our good side right away, and so they're going to give us some things. I think the thing we're likely to get from them is healing technologies. They're masters of genetics. I think they probably could easily provide us the tech to cure most of the major diseases we have, particularly the really bad ones, the Alzheimer's and dementia and so forth, and obviously cancer, which, let's face it, we would be very grateful, very, very grateful for that. And so, oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. Oh, really? My mother is completely changed. She's back with us. I love this. And it's possible, David Jacobs would disagree, it's possible that at some point they may say, and by the way, we have a lot of hybrids we've been keeping in storage. They're hanging out somewhere. And we'd like them to come and hang out with you and live with you. Because it would make it easier for this transition to go well and for you to get to a point where you can be involved in our world. Engage with us. Because they are engaged with each other. So I got a feeling that there's a place at the table. And let's face it, people are going to go, great. You've healed my cancer. You've actually provided some longevity technology. We may live longer. Hopefully they also provided some really quality galactic birth control. Works with everything, no problem, no side effects, very easy, male, female. That's important because if we're going to live to 150 and not deal with the population issue, we have a real problem. So they would do that. And so some guy will raise his hand, hey, look, I've got a room over my garage. Some couple of hybrids could stay there. It's okay. That could happen. That would be pretty cool. So we got contactees, we got hybrids. Things are getting really interesting. But then they're going to give us the bad news. They're saying, look, there's a galaxy out there. You can be connected to it. You can be part of our world, but there's some things you're going to have to deal with. You want to be here? You want to be part of this? Fine. I have no idea why that's doing that. But, that's more disordered, isn't it? That's more disordered. That is a perfect example. No, but that's asymmetry becoming more entropic. That's sheer genius that took place in that computer all by itself. They're going to say, let's go back. Say one. You're going to have to confront this problem. You've never done it. Now it's time to get real. The asymmetry of destruction versus construction. And what does that mean? It means you're going to have to give up war. It has to end. 10,000 years of it, the scourge of the human race, hundreds of millions and billions of people killed. You've blown everything up. That's all you do. You blow everything up. You can't do it anymore. You have to stop. Now, even in the post-disclosure time, I don't think the motivation is going to be sufficient to generate what will amount to a global level peer pressure. But in the post-contact, I think it very well could. And how could we possibly have a actual global peer pressure so powerful, or almost as powerful as the peer pressure that now makes it extremely inconvenient if you decide to walk into a restaurant somewhere in almost any city in North America and light up a cigar? Watch what happens. That's peer pressure. People said, look, we don't want that. And the majority says, fine, and they made adjustments, and it's working fine. It's possible because there's something that ETs also knew was coming, and it's those computers back there and the phones that you have. Any one of them could have run the entire Apollo space program, and they're connected to the internet. And so we got billions of people, theoretically, just seconds from connecting to each other. We haven't even begun to use the power of the internet. We haven't even touched it. Cat videos are good, and insulting each other is fine, but the power that's actually there, the ability to bring billions of people together to form a consensus that says, okay, we want to get to the galaxy, no more war. It ends. Now, if anybody wants to raise their hand, Dick Cheney on his 4th heart replacement, and saying, look, we need another war, we say, Dick, take a Xanax. Chill out, dude. Somebody else is trying to say, look, you just get me in power, and I'm going to give you that war you've always wanted. And we just say, no, we're going to take you down the hall, we're going to talk to you, but you are not going to rule. And the other thing, of course, is this, right? You get it, we've known. This problem, this spectrum, this particular group of individuals, you cannot let them get into the White House. You cannot let them get into the Kremlin or the palaces in Beijing or anywhere else. They cannot rule. If they start to go there and you figure it out, you pull them out. You do not vote for them. You do not support them. If they do a masquerade and they show up in power and they're running your country and then they pull their mask off and it turns out they're a total lunatic, then you remove them. But you would do it hopefully non-violently, but in any case, you will have the consensus of the global population behind you. Sorry, you're not allowed to rule. This is the way it works on the earth now. You will leave now. We have to do that. Because even if you try to deal with the asymmetry and you left the pathological group into power, they will take you back into war. That's been going on for 10,000 years, and we have never confronted it. But post-disclosure, post-open contact in a galaxy in front of us, we could very well confront it and deal with it in a short amount of time. So, imagine you're me 21 years ago, and you get into this field, and after about a year, maybe 2 years, you start to realize that this thing going on, this process, is leading to a transition, a shift, which literally could make it possible for war to end. Literally, war to end finally on this planet. Whoa. And by the way, not just war, because one of the other things the ETs are going to say, and whatever you do, right, you want to deal with the asymmetry thing or not? The psychopathology thing? Whatever. Maybe you don't want to confront it. We can watch. You can't do anything to us. Do your thing. Maybe when you finally get it together, we can talk about the galaxy. But one thing you are not going to do is you are never going to build an interstellar craft and put your atom bombs on it, your hydrogen bombs, and fly off into space. It isn't going to happen. No way. So forget it. You build them, we'll blow them up. If we have to, we'll melt all your nuclear weapons down into puddles of metal. They've been turning them off, sending us a message many times over the last 40, 50 years. So you guys, do your thing. Stew in your own juices, boil in your own oil. But understand, you're not coming out here. You're not bringing those out here. But you deal with those things. You get rid of the weapons. I know somebody will raise their hand at the Pentagon, but if we get rid of our atomic weapons, we'll be defenseless against them. And somebody should point out to them, we already are, okay? There's nothing we can do. They want to destroy us. They can do it without even hardly breaking a sweat. So sit down, all right? If they're going to destroy us, we're gone. If they're not, we need to get out there and move and go into the stars where we're supposed to go. And so imagine, again, that you are me and you realize that. Do you think you wouldn't have a passion? Do you think that you could ever walk away from it? That you could ever say, oh, this is just too hard, it's going on and on, there's no money, there's no resources, I can't do this anymore? No. No, no, no. You see the possibility of ending war in your lifetime, or helping that to happen? You stay with it until you end or war ends. And one day, human beings will be in that anti-gravity craft hanging over another planet, in another system, watching them develop, and very possibly coming to a point where it's time for us to intervene, because they're not going to be allowed to do what we were not allowed to do. And and we're going to let them join the galactic world, this other realm. And in the post-disclosure world sometime in the near future, maybe in the post-open contact era, perhaps you'll think back on my little TED Talk and the other presentations that are going to take place today, and they will help you decide what kind of paradigm architect you're going to be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve. Well done. Told you it'd be inspiring. He speaks from personal conviction all the time. I don't know if I've ever sat down and had a casual chat with Steve Bassett. This doesn't happen. In the interest of time, we are a little ahead of schedule. So what I want to do is just maybe review a few things, both within the program. And also, I want to share with you something that we did last weekend in Toronto. We had a 3-day conference in Toronto called the Alien Cosmic Expo. It's been put on for the last 4 years in Toronto at a hotel very similar to this. And at that, I spoke, plus 15 other speakers actually addressed the audience over 3 days. And in one of the talks, we discovered, just by accident, no, it wasn't by accident, it was on purpose. I did it, I'll confess. Did you realize that there's a website called Library and Archives Canada? Is there anyone in this room who's heard of that? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, 5 people out of however many people are here. Library and Archives Canada is a government-sanctioned website, right from the top down. And this particular website is called Canada's UFOs, the Search for the Unknown. And if you go and visit it, it's got this beautifully stylized UFO on it on a tilt. And then it's got a search engine where you can find out about the data. And this is another thing that will surprise you. On that website, there are 9,500 UFO files. 9,500. That's about half of the first dump that I think was France or England did 4 or 5 years ago. So it's quite clear that the Canadian government, whoever sanctions that website, is fully aware of what's going on. And if you look through it, as I've done, I'm up to about, I would say about 5,500 files, just like reading the telephone book. It's really not all that exciting. It really is boring stuff. But it's like shucking oysters. Every once in a while, you land up with a pearl. Some of these pearls are amazing, okay? One of them talks about, it's an RCMP report. It talks about UFO found. And it goes from right through the Joint Intelligence Committee, making them aware the RCMP actually found parts of a so-called UFO. There are 4 or 5 different designations: RCMP files, Department of Defense files, and what is the other one? Escapes me at the moment. But there are 4 separate search engines, and you can go to them. It's got reports written by ministers of defense over the years, as far back as Paul Hellyer, even further back than that, where he has stated unequivocally that he's never investigated UFOs, This is back when he was Minister of Defense in the Pearson government. Never investigated him, didn't want to bother with him. Now he reversed his position, of course, in 2005. But I find it rather unique that the Canadian government, hidden in plain sight, will that come up later on in somebody's presentation? Hidden in plain sight. These files are out there for everyone to see. Now, what kind of pressure can we bear or put to bear on the government of Canada to make them aware not only that the poor elected officials have no idea about these things. I've talked to the Minister of Defense about this, Peter MacKay, didn't even know that they existed. I have a communication from Peter MacKay indicating that his investigation into something that I asked him back in 2010, he couldn't find the file. I found it. He couldn't find the file. Out of Comox Air Force Base, 2 CF-18s chase 3 UFOs at 35,000 feet. And I asked the minister, are you aware of this? And he wrote me a long letter back, you know, with all kinds of yada, yada, yada verbiage to it. And at the very end, everything that we've investigated, he says, is either a small plane at 35,000 feet doesn't happen. There's not very much air up there for small planes, without a transponder, or, get this one, a flock of birds. I'm not kidding you. It's right there. It's on my website if you want to check it out, Zealand Communications. So it's quite, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of other people are concerned, that the Canadian government is up to their ears in this stuff. Completely up to, but the sad fact of the matter is, the elected officials that are sitting in Parliament today, provincially and nationally, have no idea about this issue. Don't have the foggiest notion of it. And we want to change that. And one of the things that we've done through Zealand Communications, the news service I operate, we've established what's called the Canadian Research Council on UFOs. And what we've done, we've constructed 2 separate letters, one to the Prime Minister and one to the Minister of Defense here in Canada. Sajan is the Minister of Defense, and Trudeau, as you know, is the Prime Minister. And we're asking them, actually, I invited them both to this. Where are their chairs? They're someplace here. They're not here. Are you here? No, they're not here. And I also invited them to the ACE conference, too. We had 2 chairs set aside with their names on it. So it's interesting, though, that no thing is going to happen. No thing is going to happen until we do something about this, collectively. And one of the reasons why I know Jordan is so, I guess, strident in his attempts to bring this stuff forward by doing the series, The Architects of the New Paradigm, is just that, to bring pressure to bear on governments and media. Not to, I don't care about disclosure. I really don't. We know what's going on. But what I do care about is acknowledgement and confirmation. Because the silence is deafening. So this kind of situation that we're in right now is a way to reflect upon what we need to do and to end the silence. I'm not going to go cap in hand, and no, I don't think anyone here will either. Go cap in hand to the government, please tell us what's going on. Not going to happen. And even if we do get a response from them about what we want to know, how do we know that it's even credible to begin with? All we want to do is be able to talk about this issue openly, just like anything else. And if people remember the issue of child abuse. Okay. As a principal, I was involved at a school in 1985 with 500 children. And there was a program through the health department. They decided to put a program in schools about child abuse. No one talked about it. So they brought this team in. They were puppeteers. We had the kids in the gym, the primaries first, and the juniors, then the intermediates. And the puppets, on a stage, of course, talked about the issue of, for example, Uncle Frank comes over on a Sunday afternoon and does something untoward to one of the children in the house. They portrayed that with puppetry. The presentations were about 20, 25 minutes. And at the end of the day, it was a Friday. It was a Friday. At the end of the day, they left, and the teachers started calling down on the PA system. Mr. Vigiani, we've got someone here that wants to talk to you. Send them down. The next one comes down. They're disclosing to me. we had 25 disclosures in that one day. And I was there till 8 o'clock with Children's Aid. They wouldn't let the children go home. So that's the kind of intrusive action that we need to take with respect to pressuring our government to acknowledge this issue, not to hand us over a bunch of files like I alluded to earlier. We want them to acknowledge what's going on. So it's one of the things that we're doing in Ontario, and I'm hoping that somehow here in Vancouver and in British Columbia that we can do something similar too, and maybe get each provincial government to recognize what's going on along with the national government in Ottawa. So anyways, once again, we're going to take a break right now, and yeah, we'll come back. How's 10 o'clock? Yeah, okay. If you aim to be back here just before 10, and then we'll get going with the next speaker. Thanks very much.